We're here today with collector Steve Miner, a devotee and collector and pursuer and repairer of Hamm's beer and brewing items since probably 1975. 45 years, Steve?
Yep.
And what do we have today on the operating table of Dr. Hamm's?
Well, we have a small version of the Hamm's Scenorama. This particular one, as you can see, is in pretty tough shape. As quite a few of them are that I do get in. They basically were in bars and run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they took a beating. Just the environment that they were in and the smoke and cigarette smoke and grease and everything else took its toll over the years. And a lot of times these things ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the fact that they survived this long is pretty much a testament to how well they actually were made. This one came in, and as you can see, there's several things wrong with it, but it's fully restorable. And what we're going to do today is we're going to just go through, show you a few things to look for when you're buying one, and then also how to disassemble this to get it down to basically bare bones, so to speak, and to start the restoration process. As I was saying, this is the small version of the Scenorama. This is the more popular one. They also made a large version, an almost 6-foot version, but they made probably several thousand of the small ones for every large one. The large ones you don't see an awful lot, and personally I don't like working on them because they're big, clumsy, and heavy. They take up a lot of room, and not everybody has that kind of room to display them, so subsequently this seems to be the most popular sign. This is the one I sell the most of. These were made in the 60s, and they made a bunch of them.
And there's different variations. This one is the Hamm's moving Scenorama, which it takes approximately 5 minutes for that lenticular screen to complete a rotation, but
Yes.
Originally it was said that Hamm's salesman came up with this concept when driving the back roads of Minnesota and seeing two sections of snow fence next to each other, and the difference that in driving by, the two sections almost gave a motion effect with the vertical lines on them.
And the sun was sitting in behind it, and that's where the concept came from. It is basically a very simple concept, but what a great effect. And when Hamm's came out with this, it set the beer sign world on its ear, because it was just so much different and cooler than anything that anybody else had. And to this day, it's probably the most popular sign. When I tell people I collect Hamm stuff, they always say, "Well, do you have the one with a campfire in it?" And this is the one. It's by no means the rarest or the hardest to find, but it's the one everybody remembers and likes. So one of the things Barry mentioned is there are a few variations of this. The main variations that you see on the small ones are simply the logo here. This particular one says "on tap," which would mean that this sign originally was made to go into a bar or restaurant that actually had Hamm's on tap. The other version would say "beer." That version would be in, for instance, like a liquor store or a bar that just actually sold Hamm's in bottles or cans. And then there's a Spanish version, which is the Gran Hash, which means the big H, and it's got a big vertical H here. That one obviously is fairly scarce to come by. You do see from time to time, you'll see this lower logo plate that's laying inside there. I'll show you when we get it apart. But they did make a version where they just put a clear acetate over the top instead of a silk screen. And that was later on. That way they could change that. They also had an on-tap version there. That way they didn't have to take the whole sign apart to change the location.
Before we delve into this sign and dissect it, Steve, on the case, there's both moving and non-moving versions in this chalet frame type size.
Correct.
And what would a person look for on the sign to denote that it was a true motion sign, that they hadn't put a new case on it? For the purists, it may matter.
Excellent question. Okay, there are two signs in this style deal, and as you can see on the Scenorama, the sides are painted white. There's like a stucco like material, or as part of the case actually, And there's only 2 of these signs that just actually came white from the factory. There's this sign, the Scenorama, and then there's also one that says cold beer, and it's weird because it's just a non-lighted sign, but that also has white sides. So when you get one of these, and the sides are brown, I can show you what I'm talking about.
Unless you've gotten one out of a burger joint where everyone smoked a pack a day too, and Steve's also seen those where.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, this one is quite yellow too. Okay, now here is a case without the sides being white. Now the case is identical, as you can see, and so it's not a deal breaker if you happen to get one and these aren't painted. What I do is I just mask these off and paint them white. It looks a little richer to have it done that way. I really like the white sides, but that's one thing to look at. Obviously, these little feet down here on the bottom, these get broken quite often, these little legs. And then I always look, this one is particular. What happens is down here on the bottom, somebody will over tighten these screws and break the bottom portion of the case out. And you'll see people put big old washers on there. That drives me crazy. I will not sell a sign that's done that. So look for that. And like I say, these little feet here will break quite often because the sign gets dropped. It's surprisingly heavy. It's made out of metal, and it's quite heavy.
And to pop this cover, you remove these 4 external screws.
Actually, you don't have to remove them. You just loosen them.
Oh.
There's 2 here, as you can see, and then there's 2 that you access through these top roof panels.
Sure.
There's 2 little notches right here, and all you have to do is loosen those 4 screws. And then you can remove the entire top case, like that. Here you can get a little bit better look at that white. You see how yellowed that is. And again, this particular sign is in pretty tough shape. Obviously, if you're looking at a sign and you see the case is all broken here, somebody has taken and on the black grid, this actual logo plate should be installed from the back side. They didn't know that, and so they glued it in the front. Here's the lower logo plate, and actually, like I say, that does go. It's supposed to go in like this. Is this one is too. So and then obviously the roof panels are another thing that you watch. These hang out over the edges, and a lot of times those will get caught on things and break. Now on the small Scenorama, there's 2 different lengths. There's a long panel and there's a short panel. If you see one that the roof just comes to the flush, to the edge, what somebody has done is put 2 short roof panels on there, and that's not correct. It should have an overhang like this on both sides.
And then, Steve, can you show the inner screws? A common problem in Scenoramas are these horizontal scratches across the seam, and they're a frustration and a common occurrence, and they cannot be repaired.
Well, this particular one, which is exactly what happened. See this scratch right here? What happens is, as you see, this glass is held in. There's supposed to be a piece of plexiglass here, which is, of course, gone. But these metal bars hold that plexiglass in place. And what happens is, over time, this gets brittle, and there's little bosses that the screws go into, and one of those or 2 of those will break. Here's the one that broke, and what happens, obviously, when that breaks, that allows that screw to come up, and guess what that's lined up with?
It'll sit right in there.
And one revolution, it'll put a scratch right down the center. If one of these breaks here, it's not as big a deal because that's up here, that's hidden. But when you see one scratch, generally it's always right there.